Let's get to the very first conversation, or the conversation for the day. We're being joined on the program by the House Chairman, House Committee on ICT and Cybersecurity, Mr. Adedeji Olajide. He joins us via Zoom from the United States. Honorable Olajide, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Good morning. How are you?
Well, very well. And let's begin. I know
Me.
that this may not necessarily be your forte. I'm not sure because you're Chairman House on ICT, Committee on ICT and Cyber Security, which is why we are having this conversation, given what has played out in the last few days. But I needed your quick take on what played out at the Senate yesterday on the issue of remuneration for judicial officers. I'm sure you heard the news, or you listened to the news. What's your first impression, given what you heard that 17 years down the line, their salaries have not been reviewed?
Well, good morning again. I am Honorable Adedeji Stanley Olajide, House of Rep member representing Ibadan Northwest Southwest Federal Constituency of Oyo State, House Committee Chairman for Digital Information Communication Technology. First of all, let me say this. A lot of things have been said about the remuneration of our judges. I'm in agreement, I'm in alignment that we need to review this and also and just make it be at par with international standards, because that is when we can uphold the justice or the rule of law in Nigeria. Because if we are going to have high expectation of our judges, their remuneration should be at par with their counterparts all around the world. So let me just put it at that. Right now, there's a huge gap, and that gap needs to be closed.
And so just before we let off on this particular issue of the wages or the remuneration or salaries of judicial officers, at minimum, where should we be looking at, especially for not necessarily the judges or the justices of the Supreme Court and Court of Appeal?
Well, look, I can't sit here and pretend to know exactly what their different levels are. I know a lot of our judges, they have different years of experience, and they all sit on different benches. So depending on what is the recommendation of the different parastatals that are in control of setting, I think is the Accountant General Office, where they set this salary grades. I think we should just defer to them to make the right recommendations, and we should follow suit.
All right, let's come to the issue, which is your forte, which is why we brought you on for this, Mr. Olajide, on this particular one. And recently, we saw the outcry of Nigerians concerning the cybersecurity levy that was NSA directed that this should be implemented, and then the central bank also, who is statutorily the money is supposed to be domiciled with them, and then wrote to banks to begin to do this deduction, apart from about, is it 16 or so transaction, and Nigerians rose to the occasion to say, this is not acceptable. Now, you're a member of the House of the 10th Assembly. In your view, what was the wisdom in passing that provision in that piece of legislation?
Well, thank you. Let me just, first of all, set some clarity around. I don't think we need to even go further into why we need our cybersecurity laws. Doing business on the in the digital space is very, very dangerous. And there need to be frameworks and security frameworks in how things are done. And all of these things, anytime you talk about information technology, yes, you're talking about money to implement, money to enforce, and actually money to continue to make the environment very safe. The future of our democracy, our economy, our children. We need not even stress that. Very important that we take control of what goes on in our cyberspace. However, when I look at we have issues, very simple. If you take 1 million, you multiply by 0.05, automatically it gives you 0.005, which is 5,000. But if you go ahead and if you do the percentage, I meant, ahead and multiply by 0.05, you'll give 500,000. You don't do the percentage and then do the multiplication together. It's either or. If you do 0.5%, it gives you 0.005 by default. It's 5,000. 5,000 is 0.51 million. Okay, that percentage. But if you go by 0.5, it gives you 500,000. Very clearly, this cybersecurity levy have nothing to do with our citizens. It have nothing to do with the working class. This is purely a corporate exercise. Okay, it's going after the banks and it's going after big corporate organizations to actually support, because cybersecurity. I mean, today I can tell you for free, a lot of our banks are getting hacked, and we know nothing about them. A lot of our citizens are losing a lot of money in our financial institutions, and we need to get our hands around that. So the Office of the National Security Advisor, National Orientation, and the Attorney General need to come to the table and set the record straight around the interpretation of this law, which I think is where the interpretation is where the issue is. The law is very clear. It has nothing to do with our citizens. It is not meant to create any unnecessary hardship for our people. What it's meant to do is to get the corporate organizations to act responsibly and also contribute into making sure that our cybersecurity spaces are safe for conducting business.
All right,
Again,
Mr.
there's a lot of...
Just if I may butt in
Sure.
because of time, so we can take as much as possible, because it was quite disturbing to see that this was put on citizens, and this would have clearly been antithetical to the issue of financial inclusion. And we're wondering whether some people had to read that legislation properly to know what to interpret. But we're happy it's been suspended. The CBN has given the directive for it to be suspended, at least for now. But let me come to you. You mentioned something in passing which I want to drill further,
Please.
Which is the issue of citizens losing money and banks being hacked. How much of oversight is your community doing to make sure that citizens are protected as much as possible? Recently, we heard, I think, one of the actors, Shan George, crying over money, about 3-point-something million, but it was recovered later. But we have people who we're not that lucky. What are you doing to protect the citizens from the point of legislation?
To look into all the cybersecurity issues and the vulnerabilities and the loopholes of the banks. But in some cases, some of the financial institutions have actually gone to court to say the National Assembly does not have the right to look into their infrastructure, to look at the security controls that they have in place. Again, we as law-abiding citizens, we are, following all the judicial steps and to make sure that we take down that veil so that we can look and see how many of our banks are acting responsibly and how many of them are actually just hiding under the veil of the court to not do the right thing. It's work in progress. Definitely, we are looking at all of the different financial institutions, looking at all the controls, the security controls that they have in place to make sure that our citizens are protected in our financial institution and in this industry at large.
Let's go to some strategic scorecard before we let you go, because the network, I'm not sure, is really allowing us to have a very smooth conversation. So let's take the ones we can take. I know that the Ministry of Communication had come out with a strategic blueprint, and they are looking at some level of, say, 5 billion naira yearly funding for some of this startup, maybe around to like 2027. How well do you think they've been able to perform by your assessment as the people's eyes and voice?
Well, I'm not sure I've seen the proposal you're referring to. Something I have not seen. I'm not sure I've seen the blueprint that you're referring to. When, then we can look into see if they're actually enough and adequate to protect citizens moving forward.
Mr. Olajide, can you hear me? All right. Mr. Olajide, if you can hear me, we can barely hear anything you're saying, but I think what I heard, if I stand to be corrected, is say you've not seen it, but it's actually the ministry is what they call the strategic blueprint, and it calls it accelerating our collective prosperity through technical efficiency. They are looking at some level of $5 billion yearly in funding round for some of these startups. That is a dream besides all other elements. But it will be important you get your hands on that document, given the role you play in the National Assembly. But in closing, if you may, just a quick one. Has the 10th Assembly lived up to the expectation of Nigerians in holding the executive to account?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
When you say yes, what do you
I
mean
think
by yes?
I think it looked like there's a feedback coming back from. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I wasn't hearing you, but you can just round off your
Okay.
thoughts.
To the best of my knowledge, that is by right on playing that legislative agenda, and even where we have actually earmarked some areas where interaction in a lot of the oversight and the interaction.
Oh dear, we sincerely apologize to all our audience watching because, as you can see, glitches, connection issues rather. I don't know from what end, but I was speaking with the chairman of House Committee on Digital and Communication Technology and Cybersecurity, Mr. Adedeji Olajide, who joined us from the United States. We hope we are going to have him at a later dates for a smoother conversation. But let's move on.